A logical look at the Bible and the story of Israel. This is a discussion about what the Bible is and is not, and is a story of what happened to Israel. The Bible is truth. In Psalm 119, 142, we read, "Your righteousness is righteousness forever, and your Torah is truth." Everything in the Bible is true. If there is something in the Bible that is not true, then the whole Bible is not true. The Bible is His story. The Bible tells us the story of the entirety of history. It is His story. It is about Yahweh's creation, the universe. It is about Yahweh choosing a people for Himself, Israel. It is about Yahweh giving Israel instructions on how Yahweh wants them to live. It is a story about Israel's failure to follow Yahweh's Torah, His instructions. It is the story about Yahweh sending His Son to be the restorer of Israel to Yahweh. It is a story about the end of time. Yahweh chose a people for Himself. The Bible tells us that Yahweh specifically chose a people for Himself. This people are the descendants of Abraham. The Bible tells us that Abraham, who was called Abram at the time, was a descendant of idolaters, and he lived in a land of idolaters. The Bible tells us that Yahweh called upon Abraham and told him to leave his land of his ancestors and go to a place that Yahweh would show him. Yahweh chooses Abraham. Go yourself out of your land, from your relatives, and from your father's house, to a land which I show to you. I shall make you a great nation, and bless you, and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I shall bless those who bless you, and curse him who curses you. And in you all the clans of the earth shall be blessed. This is from Genesis 12, 1 through 3. Abraham did exactly what Yahweh told him to do. Yahweh makes a covenant with Abraham. And it came to pass that Yahweh made a covenant with Abraham and his seed. Yahweh did not change the covenant He made with Abraham. Yahweh does not change. Yahweh does not change. Psalm 55, verse 19. El, even He who sits enthroned from of old. Malachi 3:6. For I am Yahweh, I shall not change. Hebrews 13, verse 8. Yeshua Messiah is the same yesterday and today and forever. James 1, verse 17. Coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no change, nor shadow of turning. Yahweh also says in Psalm 89, verse 34, I shall not profane my covenant, neither would I change what has gone out from my lips. Yahweh's word stands forever. Isaiah 40, verse 8. Grass shall wither, the flowers shall fade, but the word of our Elohim stands forever. In 1 Peter 1:25 we read, But the word of Elohim remains forever. The covenant continues. Yahweh's covenant with Abraham was continued in Abraham's only son, Isaac, and then to Isaac's son, Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons, and the covenant was passed to those 12 sons and their descendants. The 12 tribes. Jacob had 12 sons. Yahweh changed Jacob's name to Israel, so that the 12 tribes are called the 12 tribes of Israel. There are 12 tribes, not just one. The Church and Judaism have successfully convinced everyone that Israel is just the Jews now. The Church and Judaism say that any lost tribes were all absorbed into Judah. This has created such a horrific division between Yahweh's people that the only solution is the physical return of Yeshua to restore all of Israel to their rightful place. Foreigners who join Yahweh's people. So what of the people that were not born from the seed of Jacob? The foreigners or the strangers? Do they have a way of joining Israel? Well, yes. Yahweh allows people to enter into his covenant by adopting into the covenant. The adoptee becomes an actual son of one of Jacob's sons. In Isaiah chapter 56, Yahweh says of the foreigner, "And let not the son of the foreigner who has joined himself to Yahweh speak, saying, Yahweh has certainly separated me from his people." And that's in Isaiah 56:3. Yahweh continues, "Also the sons of the foreigner who join themselves to Yahweh to serve him and to love the name of Yahweh, to be his servants, all who guard the Sabbath and not profane it, and are holding on to my covenant. Them I shall bring to my set-apart mountain, and let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Their ascending offerings and their slaughterings are accepted on my altar, for my house is called a house of prayer for all the peoples." The foreigner obeys Yahweh's law. Notice that the foreigner is expected to follow Yahweh's commands. What happened to Israel? So what happened to Israel? And how did we get divided into two groups that hate each other? Israel under David. By the time of David, Israel existed as 12 tribes and dwelled in the land. Israel was united. Solomon disobeys Yahweh. However, David's son Solomon began to go after the gods of his many wives. Even though Solomon understood that he was to serve only Yahweh, he still fell prey to the urgings of his foreign wives and served the abominable foreign gods. Yahweh revealed to Solomon that the kingdom would be broken in the life of his son Rehoboam because of Solomon's sins. You can find this in 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 11 through 14. Rehoboam would have only 3 tribes under him: Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. The other 10 tribes would be given to Jeroboam, an Ephraimite, one of Solomon's talented craftsmen. 10 tribes separate. In approximately 921 BCE, the 10 northern tribes broke away from the house of David and called themselves Israel, or Ephraim Israel, making Samaria their capital. The southern tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi made up the southern kingdom under Rehoboam, with Jerusalem as its capital. And this again is found in 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 26 through 43. The separation looked like this map. The kingdom of Israel. The kingdom of Judah. The northern kingdom of 10 tribes, which was called Ephraim Israel, began to adopt pagan practices, holy days, customs, and false worship. Yahweh judges Ephraim Israel. This downward spiral into debauchery of Ephraim led to Yahweh's judgment in approximately 721 BCE, when Yahweh sent the Assyrians to utterly destroy the house of Ephraim, that is, Ephraim Israel. Since Ephraim played the whore and lifted her skirt to every foreign deity, Yahweh declared that he would sift her and cause her to be naked before the Gentile nations. Yahweh caused Assyria to seed Ephraim Israel into the nations of the world. Ephraim Israel becomes pagan. The faith of Abraham that had existed in Ephraim Israel was replaced with all the pagan practices of the Gentiles. Ephraim's lust and desire for paganism was so great, Yahweh permitted the 10 tribes to become the very thing that they so desperately and wickedly desired to be. They became pagan Gentiles. Thus, in 721 BCE, Ephraim Israel seemingly disappeared and became lost spiritually as well as physically. Thus was born the 10 lost tribes of Israel. I will have to discuss this split between Judah and Ephraim in much more detail at a later time. Yeshua came to restore all of Israel. Something interesting is found in the words of Yeshua in Matthew 15, verse 24, where he says, "I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Who do you think he was talking about? Lost Jews or the 10 lost tribes of Israel? Terminology. We have a problem with terminology. The Jews tell us that Israel is only the Jews. The lost 10 tribes have been absorbed into the tribe of Judah. The church, under replacement theology, tells us that the church is now Israel, because the Jews rejected Jesus, so God rejected them. Neither one of these are correct. What is Israel? The word Israel appears many times in Scripture. In fact, it appears 2,576 times in the King James Version. So what does the word Israel mean? Israel is Jacob, the son of Isaac. Israel is also the descendants of Jacob. When Jacob is used in Scripture, it means the physical descendants of Jacob, Israel. Israel also refers to the 10 northern tribes after the split in 921 BCE. This group is also called Ephraim Israel. In modern times, Israel also refers to the land of Israel in the Middle East. The land of Israel is also called the Jewish homeland, with no reference or place for the other tribes of Israel. We sometimes get confused by terminology, especially when either the church or Judah misuse it. Ephraim Israel was scattered. In 721 BCE, Ephraim Israel was scattered to the lands of the heathen, the Gentile nations. Ephraim Israel rejected the faith of Abraham, that is, Torah, and embraced Gentile practices, even going so far as to commit child sacrifice. Yahweh caused Ephraim Israel to be scattered to the four corners of the earth. They were scattered into all of the Gentile nations, and they adopted the religious practices of the Gentiles. They became Gentiles. Yahweh brings them back. In Isaiah 56, verses 6 and 7, we read, "Also the sons of the foreigner, who join themselves to Yahweh, to serve him and to love the name of Yahweh, to be his servants, all who guard the Sabbath and not profane it, and are holding on to my covenant. Them I shall bring to my set-apart mountain, and let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Their ascending offerings and their slaughterings are accepted on my altar, for my house is called a house of prayer for all the peoples." The foreigners who return to Yahweh. They join themselves to Yahweh. They serve Yahweh to be his servants. They love the name of Yahweh. They keep the Sabbath and do not pollute it. They take hold of Yahweh's covenant. What happens to these foreigners? Yahweh brings them to his holy mountain. They are made joyful in his house of prayer. Their offerings are acceptable to Yahweh. And Yahweh will gather them to himself. Yahweh gathers the outcasts of Israel. Isaiah 56:8. The Master Yahweh, who gathers the outcasts of Israel, declares, "I gather still others to him besides those who are gathered to him." Gentiles become Israel. The foreigners who return to Yahweh look and act like Gentiles. They eat unclean and break the Sabbath, and they have no understanding of Torah. Even so, Yahweh brings them back. They become the fullness of the Gentiles. They will go through an arduous process of becoming Israelites. They will have to unlearn what they have learned in the church. The end. Well, that's all for this video.